Hi everybody, thank you for coming. This is the busy developer's guide to quickly integrating HTML5 with Java E7. Over the last years, quite clearly there's been a massive revival in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS development. Now the question to ask as Java developers is, to what extent can we benefit from that revival? To what extent can we integrate some of the techniques and even some of the technologies themselves into our work as Java developers? And that's really the focus of this very short half-hour session. Now the question first of all is, can we integrate anything from that cool-looking HTML world into our Java applications? And quite clearly the answer is, in my mind, yes, otherwise it would be a really short session. This is me, my Twitter, I'm on Facebook, my email. I'm going to be using in the coming half hour a toolbox that's completely free because it's a great combination, as I'm hoping you'll see. So first of all, obviously HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, after quickly looking at what those technologies entail together on a high level, Java EE, and NetBeans. So very brief introduction to NetBeans on the level of providing some context to what we're doing here. Of course, well known, ready to use out of the box. It's standard, typically known as a Java IDE, but over the last years has focused more and more increasingly on HTML and JavaScript and CSS type development. Idea is you can download it and run it, and it's got a whole range of tools that are useful when you're doing work with, not just with Java development, but also with web front-end development. How it's unique compared to alternatives is the strong focus on out-of-the-box development. So you download it, you start it up, you don't go on a lengthy treasure hunt for useful plugins, but everything that you basically need is already there. There are some additional plugins and a large community to provide even more. It's open source, it's completely free. Every single thing that you're going to see is free in this half hour, and nothing requires any special plugins or special installations or special configuration. It's all exactly as you get it. It's also very good with Maven and Git, great tools for that, and you'll see some of that too. So just quick background on the NetBeans part of the story. Now the HTML5, we need to say a couple of words on what HTML5 is, because quite clearly different people mean different things when they use the term HTML5. Obviously on the simplest level, when we're talking about HTML5, we mean the new tags, the new elements, the new attributes that have been introduced in the latest specification of HTML5. Such as video and audio and canvas, but there's also article and section. There's a lot more focused on more semantic knowledge, more semantic wealth and richness in the tags that you can use in HTML. Not only is there more richness and wealth there, but there's also more focus on multimedia, on video, on those kinds of concerns, multimedia displays of various kinds. Now, in addition, when we're talking about HTML5, we also mean, related to it, the CSS3 specification, so the latest specification of CSS, which, via, among other things, the keyframe rule makes it possible to do animations and transformations, define that within CSS. And there's also media rules, so that you can create different style sheets and different rules within style sheets for different platforms, for different places where you want to display your user interfaces. Related to that, there is also an incredible resurgence in JavaScript libraries that have been developed over the past years in relation to HTML and in relation to CSS, and these work very well together. And it almost seems like every other month or so, or every other week sometimes, a new JavaScript library pops up. In the same way as a new Java web framework would pop up a couple of years ago every other week. Now that innovation and all the changes and enhancements in that area are happening on the web front end. To help with this world, especially if you're coming from a Java background, is a number of different kinds of preprocessors to also be aware of that exist in the context of the HTML5 platform. And the nice thing as we know, as Java developers, is with developing in Java, that increasingly we've been moving away from XML and towards annotations, so that we can do all of our coding inside one Java editor, inside one language, using one set of tools. Now, the unfortunate thing is with web front-end is now you have a whole range of different languages that you have to work in, with a whole range of different files that may or may not be related to each other. And being productive, as productive as you've been in Java development, is quite hard to achieve with HTML5, with the web front-end story. So to help, on one hand, you have a number of preprocessors to be aware of. So first to mention is Emmet. You don't actually need to type HTML as you know it with HTML tags. Instead, you can include Emmet in some way in your development environment, which provides a nice simplified language which can be expanded out using the tools in your development environment into the HTML tags that you're actually interested in writing. Similarly, you don't have to code directly or write directly in CSS style sheets. Instead, you can use Sass or less, Sass standing for super awesome style sheets, to use those in a simplified syntax, define what you would want to have in your CSS, and then the Sass processor that you've installed, the less that you've installed via Ruby Gems, takes that style sheet and turns it into an actual CSS style sheet. And similarly, CoffeeScript and Dart. So you don't necessarily need to type in JavaScript as we know it. You could use CoffeeScript and have it converted from CoffeeScript into JavaScript. And Dart also provides a pre-processing aspect to its whole set of tools that it provides. Now, the end game for HTML5, most people doing HTML5 development are actually not specifically focused on developing for displaying their UI in a browser on the desktop. They're actually focused on also or only displaying that inside of a mobile device of some kind, so Android, iOS. So this is actually the end game. This is a nice thing, that once you have a UI for display in the browser on the desktop, it could also be displayed on a mobile device. Alternatively, what you can do is you can use PhoneGap, or also known as Apache Cordova, or the new project that came out of PhoneGap, to create more or less native Android iOS packages from a pure JavaScript, CSS, HTML application. So you don't need to know the native language of the device for which you're developing. You can create a standard JavaScript, CSS, HTML application using Angular or whatever you like, and then use either PhoneGap or Cordova to turn that into the package that you're interested in. So when we're talking about HTML5, we actually mean a combination of all these different things. And these are broadly the categories of components and libraries that we're referring to. So it would be nice to have a kind of development environment that incorporates tools for all of these different libraries and these different ways of working. A set of tools that has support for those new HTML tags, that knows what to do with them, that gives them the correct syntax coloring and things like that. To have a JavaScript editor that knows what to do with all those different JavaScript libraries, a CSS editor, maybe a GUI editor on top of it, some kind of way to interact between these different editors so that you're not hunting from one editor to the other for the code that you're looking for, but a simplified way of getting around. Also useful would be a debugger, JavaScript debugger, a visual way of doing your CSS editing, and a way to integrate with Sass and less, and also with Cordova, to integrate that into your development environment. Plus, what is actually part of your development environment increasingly when you're doing web development is the browser. So a way to not have the browser as an external application that you deploy to and then you look at and then you deploy again, but instead to have it integrated into your workflow. So that's the combination of tools that we're going to quickly look at. So first of all, a JavaScript editor that supports all the different JavaScript libraries that you're interested in using via code completion, syntax coloring, and the like. Secondly, a debugger to step through your JavaScript code. A CSS editor, a source editor, but also a GUI editor, and a way of getting from the browser back to that CSS editor, and from the CSS editor into the browser. A way to do your Sass and less pre-processing directly in your development environment, not have to go outside somewhere and figure it out. be able to deploy your applications into a browser, whether it's on the desktop or on a phone of some kind, and also to generate via Cordova the native packages and then deploy those to either the emulators or the devices that you're working with. So with that quick background, let's switch. And just to show you these different parts fitting together in one whole, I'm going to create a little application here that contains, as you would expect, CSS and images and JavaScript. And it's just a pure web front-end application. There's actually also a distribution of NetBeans that just focuses on this, that doesn't have any Java. So this is a large distribution which contains Java and Java EE and such. But there's also some that you can just have HTML5 and PHP to work with. So here's the application. Let's immediately deploy it to Chrome. And Chrome starts up. So I've installed into Chrome a special plugin from NetBeans, which lets me switch between different layouts. So let's say we're creating this for a smartphone. This is what the application would look like, and therefore I should have a look at my content to see whether it actually is responsive or not to the different layouts. So this really lets you do that. So I'm going to go to quite a small one so that we can see it alongside my development environment. So here's the development environment. Let's make it a bit smaller, and let's move this portrait version of Chrome along to the side here. And now the point is, okay, so we're going along, looking in the browser, and we're thinking, hey, these images should really be bigger. And now normally you have no clue where to find those images inside your development environment. But instead what you can do now is say inspect in NetBeans mode and click on the items in the browser. And you can see in the bottom left that the navigator, if I browse on the navigator, I can also see what I'm seeing in the browser. But as I click in the browser, I can see the items displayed directly in the IDE. Moreover, when I've selected an item, and I decide, hey, it shouldn't be that size, but something different, I can make those changes directly here. And all I'm doing now is pressing the up arrow key. I'm not actually saving. I'm just pushing up and down. And that's how you want to work. You don't want to make a change, save, make a change, save. You want to tweak and save. And from here, we can jump directly into our source code and see our CSS displayed and make our change directly in here if that's what we want to do. So now I'm making a change. You can see this is a lot smaller now. And bigger again. So we're now working with our CSS, our JavaScript, and our HTML cohesively, comprehensively, consistently as one whole rather than as separate documents. But what is even more interesting is if I switch out of this and I now go into the Chrome developer tools, and let's find something. Let's look in here. We see a font size. Okay, so there's a text. It has a font size. We change it from 13 to 40. Of course, it becomes bigger in the browser, but I can see that there's a change in a particular file, Bootstrap CSS. So I open this, and when I look at the history of this file, I see a change has been made. So there's a change. So as I make a change inside of the Chrome developer tools, NetBeans is notified and updates itself with the new information I've typed in. So here are some more changes. So as I make a change, so here is my font size again, 60 pixels. So here's another change. And the change shows from 40 to 60. So integration directly, round-tripping from Chrome Developer Tools directly into NetBeans. So this combination of tools, and we haven't even looked at the JavaScript Debugger yet, but we can also do that very quickly. And here is our JavaScript debugger. So let's put a breakpoint here. And the cool thing is that, well, except in demo mode, let's see. Well, the cool thing is that except if you're doing this demo live, you can actually step directly through the code I'm going to just start up that browser again. Okay, there it is. So we can step directly. So if I didn't have this, I could set it, refresh the browser, and step directly through the code of the application displayed in the browser. So I can step through it now. So a whole range of tools useful for creating. Web front ends. So that's the HTML5 part. So now we're going to the interesting part from a point of view of Java developers, so the Java EE platform. Now, how to combine this set of tools and this set of technologies into a Java EE application. So Java EE, in a way, has been striving to do something similar in the sense of becoming more simple, more productive, based very strongly on specifications and increasingly on conventions over configuration. Traditionally, this is the picture that one talks about when talking about Java EE. So we have a database, we have specifications of how to interact with the database, we have specifications on how to get the data from that model layer up into the UI via the controller classes, the EJBs, and on the highest level, we have a series of JSF component libraries to help us, such as frame faces. Now, in the Java EE 7 specification, a range of new specifications have been added to the Java EE 7 platform to help and assist in this increasingly HTML5-centric world. So JSON, WebSocket, concurrency, batch in particular. So JSON becoming an increasingly popular way to exchange data versus XML, a new specification in the Java EE 7 platform to unpack those JSON strings in a standardized way. WebSocket, full duplex communication channels over a single TCP connection, handled via Java APIs with annotations, as is increasingly the case with Java EE, and also concurrency and batch, similarly focused on speed and performance, and RESTful web services providing a standardized way of exposing data that you have in whatever form, either to the UI in JSF or to a UI that could be created in JavaScript. So again, there's a series of tools that we can use to do that, to combine those two together. And NetBeans as a Java editor is in a good place to do that, with James Gosling repeatedly talking about how he uses NetBeans for everything. And he spends 10 hours a day using NetBeans, particularly because of the integration with Maven and Git and JUnit, find bugs, just the integration with so many external tools directly into the development environment. So in the context of Java EE, a lot of close work between the team at NetBeans and Glassfish and WebLogic to end up with a situation where we can now combine the two worlds very easily. And that's what I want to show in the final demo. And we should have enough time to do that. So I'm going to close this very quickly, and we'll start by looking at the database. So here's our data. So we view the data, and we want to create a CRUD application in Backbone.js on top of this database, using Java EE on the back end. And we have, as you would expect, things like SQL code completion and so on. We have a way of accessing our data and seeing it displayed. So let's start off by creating a new application, and we'll use Maven. And no plugins were installed to be able to use this. So we create a new Maven web application, and let's call it Customer Manager. Put it somewhere. Well, something different. Choose a particular server, which could also, in the latest development builds, be a Tommy server. And create a basic Java web application. So as you might expect, you have a POM file, inside of which is defined the fact that we are using Java EE 7. Okay, so now we have our data in our database, and from there we can say RESTful web services from database. So point to the database that we are actually using. So here are the tables that we saw before. I choose one that we're interested in, and two others are included with which we have foreign key relationships. We say where we want to have them created. If the database changes, we can come back, and you'll see that you'll then be able to update those classes that have been generated, which means nothing will be removed, only new getters and setters will be added to those classes. And then we specify where they should be created, as well as where the web services should be created. So then a bit of generation is done, and all these classes are generated from predefined templates that you could change. So you can override all these templates, add your own logic, add your own logos, and whatever you like. Switch into the POM, and you can see that we can look at a graph. So cool thing is you can export this as an image and send it to your manager to prove how hard you're working and how complicated the job is that you're working on. And then have a look at all of the classes that are generated. So we have now a Java EE backend, and it's got JPA classes. So unsurprisingly, we'll find pojos with annotations on the top. And inside of the named queries, we can use code completion for our SQL query strings, which is also quite useful. To redefine those named queries. And for the rest, we have a plain pojo. We have bean validation and JPA annotations added, so also useful for learning about those annotations, to see them actually in practice, just a plain pojo with annotations. In addition, we have our EJB, defined by the fact that we have a stateless annotation, but also this is also a RESTful web service, because we have a path annotation. I found this a little bit of a lengthy path, so I'm going to change this to customers. And once the URL gets to this path, to customers, the method that will automatically be called is find all, because all of the other paths created, all the other methods have a path assigned to it. This one doesn't, so our customer's path will get to our find all method, which will return all the data that is underneath this, which is via our SQL query to our database. Now here we have application XML. We'll change this to application JSON. And then let's quickly deploy the application. So we will run it. And just to see the actual JSON payload displayed in the browser. The application starts up, and the browser starts up. And we have web resources, first of all, and then we have customers. So here's the JSON payload. The question is how to display this inside of our HTML5 frontend. So for that, handily, we have a RESTful JavaScript client. So we point to the particular REST project that we're interested in. So this is our RESTful resource. We say we want to use that. We want to have a Backbone.js front-end created with table sorter UI. Say next and give it a name, customers, and we click finish. So now created for us is a Backbone-based application. So it uses, jQuery. As you can see here in the application, Backbone _ there's also a REST client. And the most interesting part here is that you can see, if I switch to distraction-free mode, that our URL root, this is the root of our RESTful resource, which is then parsed in the Backbone way, and using the Backbone MVC structure gives us our UI, which is linked into our customer's HTML file that was also created. So if you now go back into our application, and we type customers HTML. Here is our application. So here is the data from our database. We have a CRUD application. So of course we can change this. We can create new. So if I select a particular item, I can see that here is the UI, or here's the data. I can change the data, save the data, create new data, complete application created as a starting point for creating our own similar application. So what you've seen is using this free toolbox, combining HTML, Java EE, JavaScript, CSS, and NetBeans, we've been able to create an HTML5 application where we can inspect inside of the application from the browser, and from inside Chrome Developer Tools, we can make changes and have those automatically be updated in the development environment. Plus, we can very easily integrate Java EE and HTML5 together as a starting point for our own applications. So that leaves me with this slide, and about 5 minutes left. So are there any questions that anybody has? Yes.
What did you use as a kind of plugin between your Chrome and your...
Yes. Yes, there's a plugin created by the NetBeans team for Chrome that you can get from the Chrome store and install into the Chrome browser. And then all this interaction is possible between the browser and the IDE. Yep. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to come up and talk. And thank you very much for coming to the session.